a professional bounty hunter with over 6,000 captures in his 27-year career. He also stars in the new A&E series Dog the Bounty Hunter. Please welcome Dwayne "Dog" Chapman.
Once a household name, Dog the Bounty Hunter thrilled audiences by chasing fugitives and living like a larger-than-life legend on reality TV. But behind the fame, a darker chapter unfolded. The spotlight faded, personal tragedy hit hard, and his world began to unravel in ways fans never expected. What led to Dog's fall from the public eye? And how did he cope when the cameras stopped rolling? Join us as we dive into the highs, the heartbreaks, and the untold truth behind the man who once captivated millions. The fall of Dog the Bounty Hunter. Dwayne Lee Chapman used to be one of the most recognizable faces on American television. With his long blonde hair, leather vests, and signature sunglasses, people didn't just watch Dog the Bounty Hunter, they were glued to it. He was dramatic, intense, and had a style that felt larger than life. But what made him famous wasn't just his look. It was the high-speed chases, the intense captures, and the moments when hardened criminals broke down in the back of his SUV while he gave them fatherly advice about turning their lives around. But things have changed. The spotlight faded, the show stopped, and the man once seen as a crime-fighting hero slowly disappeared from the screen. The truth behind that fall is darker than most fans realize. From personal tragedy and legal setbacks to serious health scares, Chapman's life has taken hit after hit. The death of his wife, Beth, left a massive emotional wound. On top of that, his career became tangled in scandals, and the same media that once celebrated him started to turn away. This is the real story of how one of television's most unforgettable personalities rose to fame, and how everything came crashing down. Chapman was born on February 2, 1953, in Denver, Colorado. His father was a strict former Navy officer who ran the house like a military base. His mother was deeply religious, and between the two of them, there was little room for warmth or comfort. Chapman didn't grow up with the kind of emotional support many kids need. Instead, he was raised in a home where toughness was expected and softness wasn't allowed. He started acting out young. By his teen years, he had already broken away from his family. He found a new kind of structure in the Devil's Disciples, a motorcycle gang known for smuggling, theft, and violence. To Chapman, this was survival. It was loyalty, brotherhood, and power. He adapted fast. Theft and chaos weren't just part of his world, they were the rules of it. In 1976, everything went sideways. Chapman was waiting outside in a car while one of his friends went inside a house during what was supposed to be a quick job. That job turned into a murder. Though Chapman didn't pull the trigger, the law treated him as an accomplice. He was sentenced to 5 years at Texas State Penitentiary, one of the roughest prisons in the country at the time. Prison was brutal. Every day brought new threats. Weakness was dangerous. Chapman had to learn how to survive in a place where trust was rare and violence was constant. But inside those prison walls, something began to shift. An older inmate, who had once been a priest, told Chapman that a life of crime would only end in one of two places: dead in a ditch or locked up forever. It was a wake-up call. Chapman started to rethink everything. He took on a special role as a prison warden's assistant, one of the few jobs in prison where inmates were given real responsibilities. He helped maintain order. For the first time, he found purpose in structure instead of chaos. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was slowly starting to rebuild himself. A new purpose, behind bars. Inside prison, Chapman found an unexpected role. He wasn't just another inmate trying to stay alive. He began helping prison staff keep order. He stepped in during fights, helped reduce gang tensions, and took on the unofficial role of a peacekeeper. For someone who had spent years thriving in chaos, this was a major shift. He wasn't causing trouble anymore. He was controlling it. One day, an inmate tried to escape. Guards rushed to respond, and Chapman jumped in to help stop him. That moment stayed with him. It made him think, what if he could use what he knew to catch criminals instead of being one? What if the same instincts that once got him into trouble could be used to bring people to justice? After serving 18 months, Chapman was granted parole. As he stepped through the gates of Texas State Penitentiary, he wasn't the same man who had entered. The rebellious biker who once felt untouchable had been stripped down and rebuilt. He walked out with a new mindset, one centered on redemption. But outside prison, things weren't easy. Starting over with no education and a felony record was nearly impossible. People didn't trust him. Employers avoided him. The system, which claimed to believe in second chances, didn't make room for someone like him. So he hustled through a series of odd jobs, construction, security, anything that paid. But none of it felt right. None of it made him feel like he had purpose. Then came a strange request. A friend asked Chapman to help track down someone who owed money. Within minutes, he found the man. That was the moment something clicked. For the first time in his life, he had done something legal that still felt like who he was. He had used his street smarts, instincts, and intensity, and it worked. He didn't need to be part of a gang or carry out crimes to feel powerful. He could chase criminals instead. That single moment of catching one man turned into an entire career. Chapman found a calling in bounty hunting. In the US, it's a legal profession where licensed individuals track down fugitives who skip bail. It was risky, unpredictable, and sometimes violent, but Chapman was already used to that world. What set him apart was that he truly understood the people he was chasing. He had been in their shoes. He knew how fugitives thought, where they'd hide, and how they might react. At first, he took small jobs from bail bond agencies, just enough to get by. But even then, he wasn't doing things the usual way. While others focused on quick captures, Chapman talked to the people he caught. He wanted them to understand that there was another way out, just like he had found one. He wasn't trying to scare them, he was trying to change them. This approach gave him something most bounty hunters didn't have: a reputation. He wasn't just catching fugitives, he was telling a story. One that the world would eventually watch unfold on TV. A different kind of hunter. Chapman didn't approach fugitives like most bounty hunters. He didn't rely on threats or force unless absolutely necessary. He believed in confronting people with the truth and giving them a moment to understand the consequences of their actions. He saw himself in them, people who had made bad choices and thought it was too late to turn around. To Chapman, it wasn't about punishment. It was about change. That mix of strength and compassion made him stand out. He was trying to offer them a second chance, something he knew was rare. In a world that often judged criminals as hopeless cases, Chapman came in with a different message. You're not done yet. As word of his work spread, so did his reputation. In a profession built on fear and force, he brought something different: empathy. But the moment that would define his career wasn't about kindness. It was about risk, danger, and national headlines. In 2003, Chapman decided to go after someone few had been able to catch. Andrew Luster, the heir to the Max Factor fortune, had been convicted of multiple violent crimes. The court had sentenced him to 124 years in prison. But before he could be taken into custody, he vanished. Authorities launched a massive search, but months passed with no sign of him. That didn't stop Chapman. He wasn't working for the government. He had no official orders, but he saw this as his mission. He spent months tracking leads until he discovered Luster's location, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. It wasn't just him on the ground. Chapman had his team and his son with him. Together, they came up with a plan. In June 2003, they spotted Luster on the street and made their move. The arrest was quick and clean. They had done what law enforcement couldn't. Luster was in custody, but instead of being treated as heroes, Chapman and his team were arrested by Mexican police. Bounty hunting wasn't legal there, and they had broken the law by capturing someone without permission. Chapman was detained along with his crew, and although they were eventually released and allowed to return to the United States, the situation was far from over. Mexico wanted him back. The threat of extradition loomed, and for years, Chapman would deal with legal pressure that never fully disappeared. But all of that came with something else: fame. The capture of Andrew Luster made headlines across the country. People wanted to know more about the man who had pulled off the impossible. News outlets covered his story, interviews followed, and then came the interest from television. Suddenly, Chapman wasn't just a bounty hunter, he was a household name. His career had taken a dramatic turn, and now the world was watching. From fugitive catcher to TV star. After the Andrew Luster case made national headlines, Chapman received an unexpected call. A&E wanted to create a reality series based on his work. This wasn't just about showing action scenes or dramatic takedowns. The network saw something in Chapman that went deeper. He had grit, yes, but also something rarely seen in bounty hunting, and that is heart. The show, Dog the Bounty Hunter, premiered in 2004 and instantly grabbed the audience's attention. It wasn't just the suspense. What kept viewers coming back was Chapman himself. He didn't act like someone above the people he was arresting. He understood them. He spoke to them with calm and clarity, often trying to steer them away from repeating their mistakes. There were moments when, after the chase, he would sit with the person he had just taken in and talk them through their situation. He encouraged them to see their future differently. He told them that change was possible because he had lived it himself. That connection between his past and their present gave the show a depth no one expected. The show wasn't built around Chapman alone. Beth Chapman, his wife, stood by his side through every arrest, every call, and every close call. She wasn't there just for support. Beth ran the show behind the scenes. She handled the paperwork, coordinated operations, and often gave sharp, clear direction in the heat of chaos. Her no-nonsense attitude, combined with Chapman's raw intensity, created a partnership that balanced emotion with discipline. Their bond was part of what made the show work. Viewers didn't just see bounty hunters, they saw a married couple trying to do good, trying to run a business, and trying to help people, all at once. Together, they built something bigger than television. They built a brand. As the show grew, so did Chapman's fame. He started appearing on major talk shows. His name popped up in magazines. People stopped him in the street. For many, he had become more than a man chasing fugitives. He was a symbol of redemption. He didn't hide his past. He used it. And that honesty made him stand out. Over the years, Dog the Bounty Hunter captured hundreds of cases on camera. Some were routine bail jumpers. Others were dangerous criminals running from serious charges. No matter the case, Chapman approached each one with the same drive. And behind every takedown, there was always that moment after the part where he didn't just cuff them, but tried to speak to the person underneath. The pressure of public life. Chapman and his team didn't just chase people down. They used strategy, surveillance, and psychological pressure to make fugitives surrender. It wasn't always about force. Sometimes it was about timing a phone call, speaking to a family member, or making someone believe there was no way out but to give up. The tension built fast, and once the confrontation happened, everything moved in seconds. With fame came a different kind of challenge. Chapman wasn't a nameless bounty hunter anymore. He was a public figure. His face was on TV, his words were quoted, and his private life became open to criticism. The same people who once admired him started questioning his decisions. Every move he made was picked apart. The job didn't change, but the world around him did, and it didn't always play fair. Controversies followed. Some were about his language, others about the way he handled situations on and off screen. The more famous he got, the more people watched, waiting to praise him or waiting for him to fail. And eventually, the cost of being in the spotlight caught up to him. In 2019, Chapman's life hit a wall he couldn't climb. Beth, his wife and partner in the field, died after battling stage 4 throat cancer. Her illness had been public, and so was her strength. Even while sick, Beth didn't stop working. She went out on hunts, stayed involved in operations, and never showed weakness on camera. But behind the scenes, the disease was moving faster than anyone expected. Chapman stayed close to her until the very end. He tried to hold it together for her, for their family, and for their crew. But everyone saw how much it was breaking him. When she passed, it was clear something in him had changed. Beth wasn't just his partner in work. She was the one who kept him steady. She helped him stay focused when his emotions ran high. Without her, everything felt unstable. Not long after Beth's death, Chapman was rushed to the hospital with severe chest pain. Doctors found a serious heart condition. He needed immediate surgery. For a man who had built his life on being fast, strong, and always in control, this was something he couldn't fight with determination alone. It was the first time in decades that he had to stop and look at himself differently. He had survived car chases, armed criminals, and dangerous arrests. But now, his own body was the threat. After surgery, the recovery was slow. His mind wanted to keep moving, keep hunting, keep filming. But his body was no longer the same. The pain stayed. The fatigue wouldn't go away. And little by little, he was forced to admit something that once felt impossible. He couldn't live like he used to. A man, crumbling in silence. The man who once filled TV screens with energy and grit now seemed hollow. Dwayne Chapman looked like a shadow of who he used to be. Physically worn down, emotionally drained, and unsure if he could carry on without Beth. He stopped taking care of himself. He lost weight, slept less, and avoided the routines that once kept him grounded. The fire that made him relentless in the field had dimmed. Beth had been more than just his partner in bounty hunting. She was the one who reined him in when his temper got ahead of him. She helped clean up the mess when he said something that sparked backlash. But with her gone, there was no one left to protect him from himself. The grief left him directionless, but soon it was more than just pain pulling him under. Chapman had always been known for his bold, sometimes reckless personality. Over the years, his name had come up in several controversies, mostly related to things he said or the way he carried himself. Beth had been the buffer, the one who softened the blow when public opinion turned against him. But without her, the consequences hit harder. One of the most damaging moments came back in 2007 when an audio recording surfaced. In the tape, he was heard using racial slurs during a private conversation about his son's girlfriend. The recording spread fast. Viewers were outraged. A&E suspended Dog the Bounty Hunter, and Chapman released a public apology. He claimed the words were misunderstood, that he wasn't racist, but the public had already made up its mind. The damage was done. For someone who had built his image around law and justice, it was a harsh twist. Suddenly, he wasn't the one chasing criminals, he was the one being judged. That controversy followed him, and even years later, it refused to fade. In 2021, Chapman tried to start fresh. A new show, Dog Unleashed, was set to premiere, giving him a chance to return to the spotlight. But before the first episode aired, it was canceled. Reports came out accusing him of making more racist comments, as well as violating firearm regulations. Chapman denied everything. He insisted the stories were false and claimed he had done nothing wrong. But producers didn't wait around for the dust to settle. They dropped the show and cut all ties with him. Networks no longer lined up to work with him. Public trust had eroded. The world that once embraced him had closed the door. At the height of his fame, Chapman and Beth had built more than just a reality show. They had a full business built around their brand: TV deals, merchandise, paid appearances, and bounty hunting contracts. But none of it lasted. After Beth's death, the finances began to collapse. The big contracts disappeared. The money they spent during their peak years didn't slow down, but the income did. On top of that, lawsuits started stacking up. Some came from people who had worked for him, claiming they hadn't been paid. Others came from within the family, accusing him of mismanaging assets after Beth passed. The legal stress piled up, adding to the weight he was already carrying. Once a star in the reality TV world, Chapman found himself being slowly pushed out. Producers didn't call back. Networks kept their distance. His name no longer drew ratings. It drew headlines about lawsuits and canceled projects. He wasn't the man everyone wanted on their screens anymore. He became the one they politely avoided. Still, he tried to find his way back. The cameras weren't rolling, but he kept reaching out, hoping someone would give him another chance. But with each scandal and public fallout, it became harder to rebuild what had been lost. Chasing a comeback, Dwayne Chapman's efforts to stay relevant in the spotlight were relentless. He appeared on smaller shows, granted interviews, and did his best to maintain some sort of media presence. But no matter how hard he tried, nothing seemed to bring him back to the level of fame he once had. His loyal fan base remained, but the damage to his image was permanent. From being a household name to fading into the background, Chapman found himself in a harsh reality, a far cry from the man who had once dominated TV screens. Chapman's identity had always been tied to bounty hunting. It wasn't just his job, it was who he was. His drive to pursue criminals and bring them to justice had been his anchor, keeping him from falling into the shadows of his past mistakes. But as his health deteriorated and the industry rejected him, it became harder to ignore the toll it was taking on him. His fame had crumbled, and with it, his confidence in his ability to rebuild his career. In 2019, Chapman tried to make a comeback with a new show called Dogs Most Wanted. This was his last shot to revive the brand he and Beth had worked so hard to build. The show focused on hunting down some of the most dangerous criminals in America, with his old team reuniting for the mission. But this time, there was a poignant twist. Beth, despite battling terminal cancer, was also part of the show. She appeared in the early episodes, offering support as they both worked to keep their shared legacy alive. For Chapman, this was more than just a career move. It was his way of honoring Beth, of proving that their bond and strength would endure even after her passing. But the reality of the situation was far harsher than he had anticipated. Dogs Most Wanted failed to capture the magic of Dog the Bounty Hunter. The show couldn't replicate the excitement and impact of its predecessor. Part of the problem was changing audience preferences, but there was more to it than that. Chapman's own health issues were impossible to ignore. His once vigorous, high-energy pursuits were now slow and labored. The adrenaline-pumping chases that had made viewers tune in week after week were gone. Now, the show felt more like a shadow of its former self. Despite Chapman's best efforts to keep the legacy alive, the show was canceled after just one season. The hard truth was clear. The world had moved on, and Dog the Bounty Hunter was no longer the phenomenon it once had been. Though he'd slowed down, Chapman wasn't ready to give up the chase entirely. In 2024, he took on a case that touched hearts across the country: the disappearance of 15-year-old Sebastian Rogers, an autistic teen who vanished in February of that year. Partnering with a private investigation firm called At Night Intelligence, Chapman used his platform to raise awareness and money for the search. The reward for information reached $175,000. This wasn't just a publicity move. Chapman actively followed leads that took him across several states, from Oregon to New York. He even reached out to federal authorities for support. While he no longer had a TV crew behind him, Chapman made it clear that he hadn't lost his passion for justice. The search became a reminder that his instincts and influence still held value, but just in a different way now. A struggle to move forward. Chapman's attempts to revive his career only seemed to push him deeper into the hole left by Beth's death. While he fought to get back on TV, his health continued to decline, and his personal life became a storm of controversy. The pain of losing Beth was something Chapman couldn't shake. He had always said he would never love another woman, but barely a year after her death, he made an announcement that shocked many. He revealed he was in a relationship with Francie, a widow from Colorado, who had also lost her spouse to cancer. Their shared grief created a bond that seemed to develop quickly. Within months, Chapman proposed to Francie, but the decision wasn't well received by everyone. Many people, including Beth's family and some of his fans, expressed their anger over the relationship, accusing Chapman of moving on too soon. They said he hadn't given himself enough time to mourn, and some even felt that he was trying to fill the void left by Beth with a hasty new romance. Several of Beth's relatives went as far as publicly condemning him, claiming that he had betrayed her memory. Despite the backlash, Chapman went ahead with the marriage, tying the knot with Francie in September 2021. He explained that she had brought him back from the darkness and had taught him that life had to move on. Still, the criticism didn't stop. Many couldn't seem to let go of Beth, and Chapman's attempts to move forward were met with judgment. With his career in decline, his health failing, and controversies swirling around him, Chapman was no longer the iconic figure he once was. The man who had enjoyed fame, fortune, and a steadfast partner now found himself with only his name and a past that was quickly fading from public memory. No longer at the center of high-risk hunts, Chapman occasionally assisted in fugitive captures when called upon by former colleagues. With decades of experience behind him, he shifted into an advisory role, mentoring a new generation of bounty hunters. Though no longer on the front lines, Chapman kept a watchful eye on the industry he had once dominated. After marrying Francie, Chapman's life took on a different rhythm. Once consumed by his work and always chasing fugitives, he began focusing more on personal fulfillment. Francie, who had given him a sense of peace, became the anchor in his life that he needed to rebuild from the ashes of his past. After years of chasing fugitives and living under a reality TV microscope, Dwayne Chapman quietly moved into a new phase of life. In 2022, he and his wife, Francie, settled in Marco Island, Florida. a place far removed from the chaos that once surrounded him. But retirement wasn't on his mind. Instead of stepping back completely, Chapman focused on something deeply personal: helping others. In this new chapter, he and Francie turned their attention to supporting abused women in Southwest Florida. It was a dramatic shift from bounty hunting, but one that gave them both a sense of purpose. For Chapman, who once tracked down fugitives on national television, the idea of providing safety and support to women in crisis became just as important. His name still carried weight, and he was now using it to bring attention to issues that had long been overlooked. After years of living on the edge, Chapman found a peace he had never known before. He and Francie began to travel together, exploring new places that Chapman had never thought of visiting. Gone were the days of chasing fugitives and constantly living life in the fast lane. He learned to appreciate the simpler moments, from quiet walks to attending religious events. They embraced a more peaceful life in Colorado, where Chapman finally found some serenity after years of turmoil. In recent years, Chapman shifted his focus to smaller media projects. He started appearing on podcasts, offering interviews, and sharing insights from his bounty hunting career. Writing became another outlet for him as he recounted his experiences in books, hoping to inspire others who had lost their way, just as he once had. Though he was no longer the larger-than-life TV icon, Chapman still maintained a loyal fan base. Those who had followed him since the beginning continued to watch his journey, curious about his life after the peak of his fame. The chances of a full return to television seemed slim. His age and health made it impossible for him to hunt fugitives the way he once did, and the entertainment industry had moved on from the style of reality TV that had catapulted him to fame. But for Chapman, what mattered most was moving forward. He may not be Dog the Bounty Hunter in his prime, but he was still Dwayne Chapman, a man who had lived through storms, refused to stay down, and continued to search for a new path. Dwayne Chapman may no longer be chasing fugitives on screen, but his story is far from finished. From the heights of reality TV stardom to the depths of personal loss, he's managed to evolve in a world that moved on without him. But here's the real question. Do you think Dwayne Chapman still has one more big chapter left, or has his legacy already been written? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.